People ask us what we mean by traditional coaching. So let's define what we mean by traditional coaching. In traditional coaching, there are two people in the room, and the coach tends not to engage with other stakeholders. In traditional coaching, the conversation is strictly confidential. Coaches are focused on active listening and are reluctant to offer up ideas of their own. In traditional coaching, there's a heavy emphasis on goal setting, and coaches are squarely focused on the future and are not supposed to explore the past. The traditional approach to coaching assumes there's one right way to coach and that you can capture that one right way in a generic set of competencies and skills.
A lot of you may be thinking, well, what's wrong with that? That's how we've been taught to coach. This is what our competency frameworks tell us we should do. But we challenge some of the basic assumptions underpinning the traditional approach. First, the traditional approach assumes that we best serve organizations by focusing our efforts on individuals, changing the world one person or one leader at a time. That mission works well with traditional OD principles, which focus on individuals as heroic leaders. But what if that approach doesn't work? While we respect the idea that the efforts of every individual matter, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that leadership is about more than just the heroic individual, and that we're not going to change the world just one person at a time. The traditional approach fails to take into account how organizations really work. An organization, by its very nature, is this system, this tangled web of multiple ever-shifting relationships. And as in any system, what happens in one part impacts on what happens somewhere else in the organization. And the nature of this process is unpredictable. The individual leader is embedded in this system, and if we limit the scope of our coaching to just the behavior of the individual, then we're blind to the impact that the rest of the system has on that person and blind to the ripple effect that person has on the broader organization. Traditional coaches tend to think in terms of individual goals, assuming that achieving those goals is solely a function of the individual's motivation and effort. But to engineer change in a complex system requires a broader, more systemic perspective.
Traditional coaching places a great emphasis on listening, not giving advice, not giving ideas, but just focusing on asking questions. But we know from our experience that the people we coach often demand of us our ideas. They want to know what we're thinking. And if we withhold that, then they can get very frustrated. Some coaches manage this by saying they wear a coaching hat and a consulting hat, and they just swap hats during the conversation. We don't really go along with those kinds of metaphors. Instead, we think of coaching as dialogue. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video.
The biggest issue with the traditional approach to coaching is that it assumes the same set of competencies will work best in every scenario, and that just isn't true. We can't coach by the numbers. Just as our coachees have to be adaptable and intuitive and think systemically in their roles, so must we as coaches.